Welcome to the Medium in the Middle podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie, the medium in the middle. On this podcast, I share my journey as a developing psychic medium, as a Reiki master teacher, as an Akashic record practitioner, and anything else that's thrown my way. Join me every week. I release new episodes every Tuesday. Hello. Welcome back. Welcome to the Medium in the Middle podcast, episode 79. My name is Stephanie. I am your host, the Medium in the Middle. Welcome, middlers. Okay, it's kind of growing on me, middlers. It really is. I know some of you love it, some of you hate it, but the consensus voted. There's like 84% voted middlers is the way. So we're sticking with it. So welcome to this week's episode. I have like a vulnerable episode, I guess you could say. And you're like, Steph, why Banff? Like that seems like an easy episode. But there's so much wrapped into the why behind why I live in Banff, why I'm here, like how I got here. And it has a lot to do with intuition and has a lot to do with like listening. And I want to share this story because it is like the prequel to next week's story. So I really wanted to share next week's podcast episode this week, but there's still some finalization that needs to happen. So I had to push it by a week. And then I was like, well, what am I going to talk about this week then? And I had a dream that I needed to tell this story. And it's interesting, I've been having dreams a lot about things that I should be doing. Again, next week we'll have more information on that, but it's really interesting how our intuition will communicate with us and how that shifts and changes. So although today's episode is about all the things that got me to Banff, when you're listening to this story, I want you to think about how this can apply in your life. What feelings and pushes and nudges and things are in your life happening to you that we maybe ignore, because be mindful that I could have ignored all of this and I wouldn't be where I am today. So it's just a really important story for me, and I've never shared it in full because it is, I feel very vulnerable sharing, and I have to like say some parts of the story that obviously I'm putting out into the world for everyone to hear. So please be gentle with me as I share this, but I know it's important, and I know that my dream about this was important, and I know that this being the prequel to next week is also important because it makes everything really land. So I'm going to share it, and it's really good that when I record the podcast, I don't have to see the hundreds of you that are listening because I would freak out. So today I'm talking about why Banff, how did I end up here, why am I here, the journey that led me here, and how this all ties into my intuition, my spiritual awakening, mediumship, everything. You could say everything. So that's the story that I want to share today. But of course, I'm going to start with some announcements. Announcements. What do I have for you today in the announcements? Some good news. There are 2 Reiki courses that are live right now. Reiki Level 1. There's one in May 1st and 2nd. And there's also one in June 5th and 6th. They're both fully held online via Zoom. They are live, and you must participate live. So there's no recordings. You have to be there. It's very interactive and hands-on. There's a few spots left in each, so they are filling up now, but they're still available. If you're waiting for a level 2, there will be one coming in June, and then if that one fills up really quickly, I will release another one in June, but level 2s are coming as well. And this month's meeting in the middle is going to be really fun. So this month's meeting, it's the last Thursday of the month, Thursday, April 29th from 5 to 6 p.m. And we are talking about crystals and chakras 101. So we're going to learn about the chakras, and then we're also going to learn about the crystals that go with it, how you can use them, how they can support you. I call this Power Hour in my Reiki trainings, but this time we're diving a little deeper with the crystals. So I'm actually really, really excited about this one. You guys loved the pendulum course last month. Thank you for all the feedback. I am trying to get the past meetings up on my website so you can still purchase them. I just am trying to figure that out. I'm learning so much tech throughout this journey. So eventually you'll be able to go on the website and purchase like past meetings if you liked them. But for now, you have to register, and everyone registered gets the replay. So even if you can't make it live, you'll get the replay that you get to keep forever. So that can all be found on my website, themediuminthemiddle.com, or all the links are down below. Okay, and then for this week's card pull, I pulled from the Kyle Gray Angel Guide Oracle card deck, and this was another week where I only wanted to pull one card. And it's funny because I pulled 2 cards before this one, and I was shuffling, thinking like, what does the collective need to know? What do we need to be reminded of? And I pulled 2 cards that were clearly for me, and I had like a little chuckle to myself, and I was like, I'm pulling for the collective, not for me. So I kept shuffling until I pulled this card. So the card that I pulled for you guys and not for myself was Blessings and Abundance, which I think is perfect after the new moon we just had on Sunday. So let's see what this card is all about. A light of blessings and abundance is being wrapped around you now, and your angels want you to know that they are supporting you. They are encouraging you to trust in your intuition and any other guidance you are receiving at this time, as it will lead you towards tremendous growth and fulfillment. Many blessings are being showered upon your present situation. If you have not yet experienced them, know that they will be revealed and shared in the perfect time, space, and sequence. All the doors to abundance are now being opened to you. Angel wisdom is encouraging you to begin counting your blessings. Then you will be open to receiving even more of them. I'm smiling as I read this because I love this card, and it goes perfectly with the theme of the moon that was on Sunday. So yes, 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 yes to all the abundance. Let it flow in. That kind of goes with this theme today, and it also goes with next week's theme. Yes. Okay. So let's get into the story of why Banff. And I kind of want to start from the very, very, very beginning because synchronicities in life are just wild sometimes. So I am from Ontario. For my American friends, that's near Michigan, Detroit, right across. And I grew up in Ontario, but I do have family that lives out west, out here in British Columbia. So I live in Alberta now. That's where Banff is. But when I was younger, the story starts. When I was in grade 5, my mom told me if I got 3 A's or all A's or something on my report card in regards to how many A's I had, that she would send me out to go visit my cousins out in BC. And I remember I got all A's and she sent me for March break, and my aunt picked me up from the airport, and I had a week with my cousins out west in Peachland. Shout out to Peachland. And it was amazing, and I remember falling in love with the mountains. And that was my first trip out west. So I fell in love with the mountains. I was in grade 5. Fast forward to university. I had my first ever boyfriend who was an amazing person, and he got a job out in Jasper. And he said, I won't go unless you go, Steph. And I didn't really want to go, but I was like, yeah, okay, like I'll try to apply for a job. Anyways, needless to say, I got the job, so I went out with him. And we moved to Jasper. We worked there for a summer, and I liked Jasper, but it was too small for me. And in that summer, we had visited Banff a few times, and I fell in love with Banff. In my mind, I was like, Banff has a Starbucks and a McDonald's, back when I could eat gluten. And it was close to Calgary. It was closer to the airport. I was like, Banff is perfect. So the next summer, I had to go back home for university. And then the next summer, I was done university. And I thought, I'm going to go back to Banff this summer. And now I had some connections that could help me get a job. And I was meant to be moving with my friend. And me and my friend, we were going to move to Banff. And I remember it was a week before, and she hadn't gotten a call for a job yet. And I already had a job lined up. And she was like, Steph, I don't know if I'm going with you. And I'm like, no, you're going to get a call. You're going to get a call. And then it was literally our going away party. I still remember it was the Friday night, and I was flying out the Monday or the Sunday. And it was our going away party, me and her, and we were moving to Banff. And she looked at me and said, Steph, I don't think I'm moving to Banff with you. And I said, yeah, I don't think you are either. Like, I'm going alone. So in my mind, I was like going with my friend, and then all of a sudden I was moving alone. So I ended up moving, and I stayed in Banff for 4 years that time. And I remember when I moved, it was very interesting because I only booked a one-way ticket. And again, I was coming to Banff for the summer, like everybody in Banff does. And I only booked a one-way ticket because I knew I wasn't coming back after the summer. And the summer came, and I was like, oh, I'll stay for a year. And then I was like, oh, I'll stay for 2 years. And then eventually it was longer and longer and longer. So anyways, so out west is where I met Joe. We met on the first day. We both started at the same job on the same day. And we met at orientation, and we just became friends. And then we became roommates because we were living in like staff housing together. And it was years before we even started dating. Again, Joe was his fake name. So I end up living in Banff for 4 years. I love the mountains. I fall in love with this town. It's just everything and more. But then things start to kind of fall apart. My boss at my job is being all weird, and then I wasn't really enjoying, living in staff housing anymore. And it was kind of like, oh, is like the time with Banff done? Do I need to go home? And of course, every time you call home, it's always like, come home, come home, come home. When are you coming home? My grandma still says this every single day. When am I coming home? I was telling her this week, oh, it snowed today, Taita. And she was like, started swearing in Lebanese. She's like, why are you out there? You should come home. I can't believe there's snow and ice there. It's so sunny. I went out without a coat on here. And I was like, Taita, we live in Canada. I can't just come home because it's snowing. She's like, it's fine that you can walk in the snow now, but when you're old, just come home. But now I'm used to it. I'm used to her telling me to come home all the time. But back then when I was younger, every single time when you call home and they're just telling you to come home, yeah, it was hard. So after 4 years, me and Joe decided to move back home or move back to Ontario. And it was like time to leave. I remember it was just like something that we told ourselves. It was time to leave Banff. Almost like Banff had this clock on it that you couldn't stay here forever. You couldn't have a life here. You couldn't buy a house here. We were always being told that. You couldn't buy a house here. You couldn't have a life here. We could only live in La La Land for a certain amount of time. Then we had to come back to real life. We had to come back to our families. We had to come back to get a real job. And I just kept being told like we couldn't settle here. So what are we doing? Just come home. Just come home. And we were like, okay, you know what? Some things were going on with my job. Some things were going on with his job. And we were like, yeah, it's time. Like we need to go home. So again, the social pressures of what you think you need to do. There's a time limit on how long we can live in La La Land. And we do call Banff Never Never Land because, people really don't get older. You don't know how old anybody is. Everybody is kind of like a child here. We're all friends. Like you could have an 18-year-old friend and a 38-year-old friend and you don't know the difference. It's just like it's La La Land, fairyland. It's heaven. It's vacation. It's amazing. So we were always told in our ears by our family, you can't stay there, you can't grow a life there, you can't have a family there, you can't buy a house there. I remember being told this over and over and over again. And I remember like getting into arguments, being like, well, my friend just bought a condo, my friend just had a baby, they live here. And they were like, you can't. And I was like, okay. So, it was time to go home. So we decided to move back to Ontario. So again, for Americans, I know Canadians know that's like across the country. For Americans, I now live close to Montana, and I was going back to around Detroit, you could say. So just from one side of the country to the other. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but I guess, yeah, you're moving across the country. So me and Joe move home, and we move actually back to his hometown. And I remember the heartache that I had with leaving Banff. I still remember we drove home actually. So we had 2 cars, we convoyed home. And I remember exactly where I was, like looking up to the mountains, being like, I was so sad, but it was such a mix of emotions because the day before we left Banff was the day I actually got engaged. So it was this crazy emotional roller coaster of like, oh my God, I'm so overjoyed that I was engaged. And then also I was so sad that I was leaving Banff. I like didn't know how to be. I'm like, do I be sad or do I be happy? Because I just got engaged, but I'm leaving my home and like my heart and the mountains. And I remember driving down Banff Avenue, which is the main street, and like crying. And I was like staring at my engagement ring because it didn't fit. So it was on the dashboard and I was looking at it. It was the duality of everything was just crazy. And everybody asked me, so I will say this publicly now, when did I know that my engagement wasn't going to work? Or when did I know that I wasn't going to marry Joe? And it was that day. It was the day after we got engaged. I knew it was wrong. It just took me 3.5 years to do something about it, but I knew the day after we got engaged, it was wrong. And I think at the time I was confused because I was leaving Banff and, just got engaged and emotions were everywhere. But in hindsight, that was the day that I knew. And I can tell you the exact spot on Banff Avenue where I was when I was like, uh-oh, I've made a mistake. So we drive home. And I remember going home, and again, it was exciting, right? Because we were coming home after 4 years, and we were engaged, and all our family was over the moon. And it was just so interesting because another weird synchronicity was the day that I literally arrived at my mom's house was the day my brother left to move to Banff. He left to drive out to Banff at like 7 in the morning, 6 in the morning. I arrived home at like 7 that night. And it was just like a weird synchronicity of he was leaving to go to Banff to move there and I was coming home. So my mom like lost a child and got one back all in one day. Again, weird synchronicities that happen. So we moved back. It was like a roller coaster of emotions. And I remember people would ask us, do you miss Banff and all of these things? Because, you come home and you start to do family things. So we were always going to dinners and baby showers and wedding anniversaries. And I just remember always going to events. I was always putting on a dress and running out the door. And at all these events, people were always asking me if I missed Banff. And I remember I would like deer in headlights look at them like they were an idiot. And I would like tilt my head to the side and just stare at them. And I wouldn't answer. And sometimes I would just walk away. Honestly, it was because I was fighting back tears. I was like, how can these dumb people be asking me if I miss Banff, where I now live in a small little town outside of Toronto, and there's traffic and pollution, and there's no mountains here, and everyone's always in a hurry and a rush, and no one's happy. And I was like, I couldn't even answer. I was like, how could they even ask me this question? So I used to walk away or just not respond. And I remember at like one event, Joe came up to me and he was like, Steph, you can't just not respond when someone asks you if you miss Banff or walk away. And I just looked at him and I said, well, they're dumb for asking me. He's like, well, that's still rude. And I said, they're dumb for asking me. Of course I miss Banff. And that was kind of my behavior for the whole first year. I was mad at anyone who asked me, and I couldn't look at a photo of any of my friends who were still in Banff. So obviously Instagram was still around. If I saw a picture of a mountain, I got mad and I just silenced everyone who was still living in Banff so that mountain pictures didn't pop up on my screen all the time. So that was year 1. Year 2 was sadness, honestly, and depression. It was just sad and miserable. And I remember at this point, I was working at Lululemon and I would still always talk about Banff. Like it was like this la la land. And I would talk about how amazing it was, how I loved my friends, how I loved living there. And I remember I was at a manager's meeting and I don't remember exactly what the conversation was leading up to this, but I remember my one manager, they were probably so pissed off that I was always talking about Banff. She was just like, Steph, it sounds like you haven't even given Ontario a chance. She's like, have you tried going to Muskoka? Have you tried doing this? Have you tried going here? And I looked at her and I was like, no, and I don't want to. I don't want to give Ontario a chance. I know I don't like it. I don't like the vibe. I don't like the people. I don't like the area. I don't like it here. I'm like, life in Banff is different and it's not, I'm not giving Ontario a chance. And I was like, yeah, I'm not. And I remember it did get me thinking, because I was like, should I give Ontario a chance? Like, am I not doing something? And I was like, no, it's not something I'm going to go find if I go to Muskoka for the weekend. I never understood the idea of people having cottages and having to leave their Monday to Friday life in order to have 2 days where they enjoyed their life. I was like, I want to enjoy my life 7 days a week. I don't want to have another house 4 hours away from the house I live in order to just have some joy and peace and quiet and get away from the hustle and bustle. That doesn't make sense to me. So I still remember that distinctly. We actually were having a manager's meeting outside, sitting under a tree, and she was like, have you given Ontario a chance? And I was like, ugh, how dare she ask me that? So through year 1 and year 2 of being gone from Banff, I never even considered coming back to visit, because I knew I couldn't. I knew I wouldn't leave. I absolutely knew I would not leave. So year 1, I was just like angry. Year 2, I was depressed. Year 3, I could start to look at pictures of mountains. So just so you know, for timeline, I lived in Banff from 2011 to 2015. And then I moved back to Ontario from 2015 to 2018. And I moved back to Banff. You guys all know that now. Spoiler, I came back. So in the 3rd year, I remember being kind of wanting to come back for a visit. I was itching for it, but I knew if I came back, I wouldn't want to leave. I just knew it. I was like, it was like La La Land. It was like the fairyland in the future, that if I went back home to Banff, that I wouldn't want to leave. Oh, and something that I do want to mention is in that year 1, we moved back in May, and my birthday's in October. And for my birthday, I got my first ever tattoo. It's a big tattoo on the side of my ribs, and it's a big key, and it has a heart on it. And it's like the key to my heart is in the mountains. And I got that tattoo in memory of Banff. And I remember that day being so solemn. I was getting this tattoo, and I showed everybody, and they were like, what does it mean? And I was like, the key to my heart is in the mountains. And I have this big tattoo on the side of my body. It's a key, but the one side of the key is a heart, and then the end of the key is mountains. And I remember it was the gift to myself for my birthday, because I missed the mountains so much. Anyways, fast forward year 3. I start to itching back to come to Banff. And this is when I was working at Lululemon, and Lululemon taught me a very valuable lesson. They taught me many valuable lessons. If anyone can get a job at Lululemon, get a job at Lululemon, just for the personal development they provide to you. It is literally amazing. Yeah, the clothes is amazing, the people are amazing, but the personal development that you get at that company is second to none. I would recommend every single human being work at Lululemon. I'm not being paid by them or anything to say this, but it was just incredible. So I learned at Lululemon how to set goals, achieve goals, set bigger goals, and then get those goals too. Everybody says I'm a good manifester. I think I'm just really good at setting goals and figuring out how to get there, because Lululemon taught me the power of writing something on paper and then it coming true, like manifesting, but goal setting. Lululemon also taught me about personal development, and that you need to be uncomfortable in order to grow and change. So this was year 3 at home, and Lululemon told me that I needed to be uncomfortable to grow and change. And I was like, okay. So I was working at Lululemon, and I had this little side business, and I had just started Reiki, and I was like, okay, I need to get uncomfortable. I need to grow and change. And it was around this time that I wanted to travel by myself. I had this goal that I wanted to travel alone, because I was scared of traveling alone. I was like, I need to be independent. I need to figure out how to support myself. I need to travel. I want to book the whole thing, plan everything. And at the time I was kind of being like, okay, you know what? I'm going to quit Lululemon and go on a week yoga retreat or something, just something that I can do and be active. But then as I was researching, I realized that, a week yoga retreat is $2,000. And for $4,000, I could do a month-long yoga teacher training. So I was like, I might as well just go for a month and do my yoga teacher training. So I really didn't want to be a yoga teacher at the time. I just wanted to immerse myself in something and just go away by myself, learn something new, and just, again, make myself uncomfortable. So I booked a yoga teacher training for a month intensive in Costa Rica. I quit my job at Lululemon, and I went. And I had this amazing experience. The month of yoga teacher training was incredible. I had just gotten my Reiki level 1 before this. So I was practicing Reiki on all the girls, and it was just a really cool vibe. There's still some of those girls that I still talk to today. So I came back and I was like in love with life again. I had my fire back. And it was a few months later, actually, that we were going to Banff for a friend's wedding. So we were coming back to Banff for a friend's wedding. This is the first time we had been back in 3 years. I remember we took the 6 a.m. flight out of Toronto to Calgary. And you guys know I'm not a morning person. So with the time difference, we landed in Calgary at 8 a.m. and we had our friends picking us up. And I remember I didn't sleep on the flight. I was so excited. And the plane, I still remember this literally as if it was yesterday. The plane's wheels, when you're landing and you can hear the plane's wheels coming out of the plane and the plane is landing and I saw the mountains and it was like the first time in my life I had smiled. It was like I forgot how to smile and I saw the mountains and I felt the wheels coming off of the plane. It was like the air smelled different. I was different. And I remember turning to Joe and I said, "We're moving back. We're moving back." And he was like, "Steph, we're not moving back." I was like, "We're moving back. I've never been this happy." And we hadn't even landed yet. And I remember jumping out of the plane, like breathing Alberta's air. And I was so happy our friends picked us up. I was jumping in the backseat up and down, bobbing. And I was like, "We're moving back. We're moving back. Oh my God, we have to move back." And I remember Joe being like, "Steph, we're not moving back. Stop saying that." So it was actually July 1st. It was Canada Day. So it took us forever to get from Calgary to Banff due to the traffic. And I remember we finally found a parking spot. I hadn't eaten all day. By this time, it was like 1 o'clock. And it was raining, of course, because it's Canada Day in Banff. And I called the restaurant that I ended up working for, the beautiful Greek restaurant in town. I actually worked for it before I left for Banff as well, just part-time. And I called them and I said, "Save me a seat. I'm coming." And we parked the car in Banff and I ran. Well, it was raining, so I was running, but I just ran to this Greek restaurant because it was home. This is where I needed to go. So I remember running down Banff Avenue and it was so busy because it was Canada Day and the parade had just ended. And it was honestly like joy was overcoming me. And I ran to this restaurant and I sat down and we had like an amazing lunch and I saw all these people that I knew and we got a discount because my boss saw me there and all of these things. I was like, amazing, everything is amazing. And I still remember the server was like, "Oh, you used to work here?" And I was like, "Yeah, and I'm moving back." And he was like, "Oh, you are?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm coming back to Banff." And I remember Joe like kicking me under this table being like, "Steph, we're not moving back." And I was like, "Yes, we are. We're moving back." And honestly, that week of my life, the only way that I can describe that week that we were visiting Banff for my friend's wedding, it was like my fire was reignited. All my sadness, all my depression that I was feeling, everything just melted away. I remember walking around holding my cheeks and I was saying, "Oh, my cheeks hurt so much from smiling. I haven't smiled this much in years." I was like, "My cheeks hurt so much from smiling." Like I was beaming with joy. So throughout the week, it was just my intensity of moving back was getting like higher and higher and higher. And I was starting to tell everybody, "Give me a good reason to come back. Give me a good reason to come back. I'm looking for a job. Give me a good reason to come back." And at that time, I didn't have a job, right? I had just quit my job. I went to Costa Rica for a month. I had a few things, like a little side business. I was coaching CrossFit. But I didn't really have anything that I needed to go back for. And I knew how much money could be made in Banff in the summertime. So I'm dancing for a whole week and my friends get married. I don't really want a wedding, but if I were to have a wedding, like they had my dream wedding at the Fairmont Banff Springs in the Cascade Ballroom, just chef's kiss. I love it. And I just remember being so happy my face hurt. Like I was tired of smiling. So I remember telling everybody, "Give me a good reason to come back. Give me a good reason to come back. I'm moving back. I'm moving back." And I remember at like close to the end of the trip, so this has probably been like 4 or 5 days of me telling everybody I see, "Hey, I'm moving back." Joe looked at me and he's like, "Steph, we're not moving back, right?" And I was like, "You may not be, but I am." I was like, I'm moving back here. I forgot what happiness was until this week. I forgot what joy was until this week. I need to be here. So we have this amazing, incredible week, and eventually we have to go home. But I was okay with going home because I knew I was moving back. There was like something so sure inside of me that I was coming back that I was fine to leave. Like I was like, yeah, see you guys soon. I'll be back. Like, don't even worry, guys. I'm going to see you all soon. My friends, my coworkers, people that I used to know, like my best friend that owns a CrossFit gym. I was like, don't worry, I'll be back. Like, see you in a few months. And Joe was like, no, you're not, Steph. And I was like, yes, I am. Like, I'm meant to be here. This is my home. This is like, I forgot what it was like to smile. That's how happy I was there. That's the difference in who I was. So we went back home, and I obviously needed to get a job because we had just gone on vacation and I had just gone a month in Costa Rica. So I was trying to find a job, and I knew I was like, oh, I'll get a job anywhere and just like work. And I couldn't find a job anywhere. Like literally I was applying and applying and applying, and I couldn't find a job anywhere. Like no one was hiring me. And I have a good resume. Like I have manager experience, I have serving experience, I have retail experience, I have supervisor experience. And I was like, why is it so hard to find a job? Like I was looking in my little town, in the next town, in like 45 minutes away. And I was like, what is happening? So then I was thinking like, okay, well, what careers could I maybe invest in? I remember I was going to be a real estate agent, and I remember I was going to work at this rehab center, and I remember I was going to maybe try to like coach more, and I remember I was trying to like grow my business, and nothing was working. Everything was a dead end. And I was getting so frustrated because my money was going lower and lower and lower, and I was like, I need money. Like, why can I not get a job? And by this time I had not had a job for 4 or 5 months. So, you're getting kind of stressed and also bored because I was like, all day I would just be on Indeed looking for jobs and then stressed that I'm not getting anyone. And I still remember when this hit happened. And I was sitting outside. I had bought myself a kiddie pool, and I was sitting in my kiddie pool on my deck, just trying to, again, find some joy. And I was thinking, like, why can't I find a job? I'm overqualified for the things that I'm applying to. Like, at one point, I think I applied to Walmart, and I still didn't get a call back. And I was like, why am I not getting any callbacks? And then it dawned on me. And it was like the heavens had opened, and everything made sense again. My guides, I guess you could say, because at the time I didn't know what was happening, they were like, Steph, you're not meant to be here. You're meant to be in Banff. You're not going to get a job here. We're not going to give you a job here because you're not meant to be here. And I was like, oh my God, this is why I'm having so many blocks. So it was literally in that moment, I was like, okay, fine, guides. If you don't want me to be here, I get it. But I need a job to save enough money to move back to Banff. Like, message loud and clear, I'm not meant to be here. You're not going to give me anything that's going to, like, make me happy where I am. And not that you need to find happiness outside of you. It was just there were so many things not working at that time. So I was like, okay, message loud and clear received. But I do need a job to give me something to save money so that I can move back to Banff. Within 1 week, I got a job. And it was like a good job. It was a cool job and I liked it, but it was just like, I knew that I was only going to be in this job for a few months. So I obviously didn't tell them that, but I only was going back to this job for a few months. So I actually got a job at Sage, another Canadian company. Love them too. And it was right down the hall from the Lululemon I used to work at. And all my friends at Lululemon were like, Steph, why didn't you just come back to Lululemon? We would obviously rehire you again. And I was like, oh, guys, because I'm moving to Banff. And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah, I just need a job for a few months. And then I'm moving to Banff. And I didn't want to do that to you guys because I didn't want to like come back and then leave in 2 months. And they were like, oh, like, is Joe okay with that? And I was like, yeah, like he said he's moving to, like, whatever. And then they were like, okay. So I got this job at Sage and I just knew that I was saving to go back to Banff. And in that time, I was just messaging my friends, being like, give me a good reason to come back. Give me a good reason to come back. And I just knew that it would all line up. So then one day I got this message from a friend here in Banff who worked at the Greek restaurant. And he said, hey, Steph, I have an AGM position available, assistant general manager, maternity leave. Do you want it? And I remember thinking, like, I didn't want to come back to be a server and I didn't want to come back to live in Staffacom. And I was like, oh, like AGM at the old restaurant that I used to love to work at. And I was like, yeah, like I do want it. He's like, okay, you're hired. It was literally a 2 text message exchange. And then I was like, can we have a phone call? And I remember he called me one day. He was like, hey, yeah, what do you want to talk about? And I was like, so like, I have the job. Like, we don't need to talk about it. He's like, no, when can you start? I was like, November 1st. He's like, perfect. I'll have shifts for you November 1st. And I was like, okay. So that was my goal. I just had to make it to November. So this was in September. And I started to tell Joe, like, okay, like I got a job. And then Joe also had like a job that was being lined up. We told our families. We started looking for places, like all of these things. We were moving back to Banff. And I remember it was like this surreal experience. And it's very interesting how the universe works, because a week before I was putting in my 2 weeks notice at Sage, my manager came up to me and she's like, Steph, like, you're an amazing worker. She's like, I want to give you a raise. She's like, I know you're not making a lot of money, but you're so amazing. Like, I want to give you this raise because I really value you. And I was like, oh, shoot. And then I was like, okay, thank you. And then she's like, and like, there's a store manager coming up at a store that actually was closer to where I lived. And she was like, and I want you to have that store. I want you to be the store manager. And I was like, this is a test from the universe. They're giving me something that's closer to home, a job that I actually do like. I liked working for Sage, and they're giving me store manager. She's like, I want you to do this. Like, I know if I put your name in, you'll get it. And it was then that I had to tell her that I said, thank you so much for this raise and for trying to get me this manager job. I was like, but actually, I have to put my 2 weeks in. She was like, what? I was like, I'm moving to Banff. She's like, what? I was like, yeah, I gotta go. She's like, but Steph, like, I can get you this job and all of these. And I was like, no, I gotta go. And it was this, like, in hindsight, I was like, oh my God, the universe was testing me. And they were giving me something that was like, you know, good enough reason to stay. And I remember it kind of gave Joe some hope. Like, Steph, they offered you a store manager. Like, you could stay. And I was like, no, we're still going to Banff. I was like, that was a test. So I could see the hesitation in Joe, and I knew that he didn't want to go. I knew that he didn't want to move back to Banff, but we were going through the motions of going back to Banff. Like, we were applying for jobs. He was having interviews. He was talking to people. We applied for some housing. We got like a 1-bedroom, all of these things. And I kept saying to him, I'm going with or without you. And he used to say, like, you used to threaten me by saying you're going with or without me. And in hindsight, I was not saying it to him. Every time I said I'm going with or without you, I was saying it to myself, because I needed to know that I was taking myself to Banff with or without him. The deciding factor wasn't now Joe or not Joe. The deciding factor was my happiness of where I wanted to be and how I wanted to live my life. So I remember saying it all the time, I'm going with or without you, so you need to like figure it out. If you don't want to go, please tell me. And it was just for myself to know, again, this like things you need to do on your own, that I was still going to go if he decided to change his mind. And again, this was foreshadowing because, of course, on the day that we were paying rent to the apartment that we got together, he told me he wasn't coming anymore. And a part of me already knew that he wasn't coming, like the biggest part of me already knew he wasn't coming, but this is the time he said it. And I was like, but we have jobs and we told our families and we sell things. And he's like, I can't go. And it was like this mad dash for me to find somewhere else to live. And I'm not even going to get into that whole story. But it was very interesting because when he was still coming with me, we were looking at places to buy. And we kind of found like our dream home, I still remember. So fast forward to, well, you guys know the story. Fast forward to, I still came to Banff, clearly without him. That's how the story of Joe and my engagement ended. And I had to choose myself. I had to choose my happiness. I had to follow kind of what I knew I needed to be doing. And in the first 2 weeks, it was so crazy. All of these things started opening up for me in Banff. So I moved to Banff. Now I'm alone. I've ended up living in like just someone's room that I was subletting for a few months because I had to find something super last minute. And everything started opening up for me. In 2 weeks, I like got a job at a local spa doing Reiki. I started back at this job. It was incredible. All my friends were still here. It was like I just stepped back into my old life. I couldn't be happier. I was just enjoying everything. And I remember I knew that Banff is a hard place to find somewhere to live. So from the moment I arrived, I was just telling everybody, hey, I need somewhere to live in June. Hey, I'm Steph. I need somewhere to live in June. Hey, I need somewhere to live in June, because I only had a sublet at this point. And I remember I was at the gym, CrossFit Banff, shout out CrossFit Banff forever. And there was this girl sitting at the table, and she was like, hey, I actually have a place to rent in June. She's like, my roommate is leaving then. And I was like, oh my God, could I come see it? And she was like, yeah, just come. This was in November, by the way, but I was still like, I need somewhere to go in June. So she's like, yeah, here's the address, and, come visit my place tomorrow night. And I said, okay. So I was driving to go to her place, and it was somewhere that I hadn't been before. So I actually ended up driving past her place, and I was like, oh, I drove past it. So I pulled into a random driveway to go to turn around. And what driveway do I pull into? The place that me and Joe were going to rent. And I recognized it because we had photos, and, we sent our friend there, and he had sent us photos and like all of these things. And I knew it was on that same street. And I was like, of all the driveways for me to turn around in, I pull into the place that me and Joe should be living in right now together. Like, what are the odds? So then whatever, I turn around, and it was like one of those moments. I was like, oh. And I went and I parked, and I went to go see her place. And where does she live? She is a neighbor to where Joe and I were going to buy our dream house. And it was the exact same layout. I was moving into the dream house neighbor. And I was like, are you kidding me? And I walked in, and it was literally like a dream. Everything was perfect. I went to just go see the room. I ended up staying for 3 hours. She had an amazing dog that fell asleep on my lap. And she was like, wow, my dog never falls asleep on anyone's lap. I channeled her grandpa. It was just like this whole perfect thing. And I remember like getting out of the car and going back down 3 hours later. And at this point, Joe and I were still talking. And I texted him and I said, guess where I'm going to be living in June? And I was like, the place right next door to where we were going to buy. And I think that was one of the last times we actually spoke. And it was just like everything was lining up so perfectly, like so synchronistic, but also like a reminder of the past and like the duality of it. So I finished up my sublet, and I ended up moving into this place, and I lived there for a year, and it was amazing. And then again, I wanted to make myself uncomfortable. So I was like, what do I need to do? Like, I want to live alone. I've never lived alone before. I've always had a roommate or lived with someone. So I got my own apartment for the first time. And then I opened a business. I did these investments that Joe never wanted to do, and I got to just do all of these things that I was kind of told weren't possible before in Banff. You can't live here and make money. You can't live here and have a career. You can't stay here forever. And I was like, I'm so happy. And that through this last year, through the pandemic, I was like, I'm so glad that I'm here where I can just go outside and smile at the mountains. Even if I need to be inside, the mountains bring you so much peace. There's this sign that when you're driving to Invermere, it's on the side of the road, and it says the mountains will bring peace to the people. And it's just incredible. So another synchronistic thing about Banff, to wrap this all up. So I was in Indigo when I was in Ontario, and I found this sign, and it said the mountains are calling. And I was like, oh my God, I need that sign. Because again, it was in like my time when I hadn't come back to Banff yet. And I remember I walked around Indigo trying to find someone to help me to find this sign because I couldn't figure out where to buy this poster from. I finally found someone to help me, and the person was looking for it, and they're like, we must be out of it. We must be sold out of it. And I was like, no, I need that sign. It was like the first time I had seen like the mountains are calling photo in Ontario. Here, they're everywhere, but in Ontario. And then she found me the very last one. And I remember I had that up in my office in Ontario. The mountains are calling. And I would look at it every day. And I was like, the mountains are calling me to come back. Like I knew I was going to be up here. Anyways, it's interesting. Now that sign hangs in my bathroom. And I was looking at it a few days ago thinking like, I don't need that sign anymore. It served its purpose. It was like a reminder to me of where I needed to go, but I don't need to see it every day anymore. Like I know the mountains are calling, and I'm here because they called. And it was also very interesting when I moved back to Banff that first Christmas, one of my best friends here in Banff, he got me a sign that said, life is better in the mountains. And I was like, yeah, it is. And I have that sign up in my bedroom, and I see that every day. And life is better in the mountains, but the mountains aren't calling me anymore because I'm here. And there's just a power in all of those steps. Like if I would have told you this story in the order that it happened, it wouldn't have seemed significant. It is only now in hindsight, as I think about my journey to Banff, as I lead up to next week's episode, that this all makes sense, that I understand my intuition. I understand why certain things happen. I understand this like synchronicities. I understand like all the people who have supported me to get to where I am today, all the yeses and the nos, the dualities of everything. So my message for you today is to listen to your intuition, listen to your gut, listen to where you know you need to be, and also pay attention when the universe is pushing you in a certain direction. And it's funny because now my mom always jokes and she says, it's my fault, Steph. She's like, I sent you out there when you were in grade 5. And she's like, it was never the same since then. You always had this pull to go to the mountains. And it's just a different life here. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, no one's in a rush. No one's in a hurry. Everyone's on vacation when you're in Banff. So all of the people who live here just act that way. There's no traffic. I don't have to get into my car every day. I live in La La Land, and I know I can live in La La Land. So I wanted to share this story because it's a powerful story for me. It's a hard story for me to tell, obviously, because a lot of emotions and life events are wrapped up into this story. I've definitely talked about being engaged and then being not engaged, but I never really told the story of it. So obviously that's lots of details left out, but for the gist of it, that's how it happened. And I think this is a powerful thing that I need to acknowledge in my life because energetically speaking, this is where my practice needs to be. This is where I need to be. This is the energy I need to sit in. This is where I need to create. This is where my business needs to be. This is where Medium in the Middle grew. This is where I started my business. This is where I was given so many opportunities. This is where I've met people that I've needed to meet. This is just, I know this is where I need to be, and I'm reminded of that daily. In hindsight, it's always 2020, right? So that is my Banff story. That's how I ended up here. That's why I'm here. This is why I know it's so important and so powerful for me to be here. Even the first year of me being here, so many things happened where even other people were telling me like, wow, like perfect timing. Like you're meant to be here. Like this is the right time. And I was like, yeah, I know. Like I just knew I was meant to come back here. When great things were happening to me, I just expected it because I knew that I was meant to be here. And now that I listened, things were going to line up for me. It wasn't like when I was still in Ontario and I couldn't even get a job at Walmart. So I hope this resonates with you, and I hope you can find pieces of this that resonate in your life and see like, what are you not listening to that you need to be? What's kind of showing up in your life that you need to be mindful of? It doesn't necessarily need to be where do you need to move to, but maybe it's something you need to be doing, a person that's in your life for a reason. Like everything is lining up for you to support you. So that's my story. I'm putting it out into the world. I feel very raw and vulnerable sharing this because there is a lot of emotions wrapped up in this story, but it is very powerful for me. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some lessons out of this. If you enjoy this podcast, please press subscribe. I release new episodes every Tuesday. If you're an iTunes user, please leave a rating and a review. It really helps me out in the podcast world. Thank you so much for growing this podcast with me. If you would like to book a session with me, I offer distance Reiki, Akashic record readings, and Psych K. That's all available on my website, themediuminthemiddle.com. Of course, all the links are in the show notes. The links to book a Reiki training are in the show notes. The links for Meeting in the Middle this month are in the show notes. Nice and easy, just down below. So thank you all for listening. Next Tuesday, I am very excited to share the episode of what's coming. And it's like the big shebang. I'm excited to just finally cross the T's and dot the I's to finalize everything so that I can really, really tell that story. My name is Stephanie. I am the medium in the middle. Thanks for listening, you middlers, and I will see you all next Tuesday in your ears. Bye, guys.